So we are wrapping up our series today. We're wrapping up our series, God's Got Questions, right? And these are questions that position us to know, to better know and understand Him, and as well as how to best live out our lives here on earth, right? Because that's the reality of it, right? We go to church, we have a relationship with Jesus, and the desire is that we would get to know Him more. And in that process of us getting to know Him better, we would then start to implement how we can best emulate Him, how we can be better followers of Christ, and so that the life that we have here on earth, we understand on how to better be better and do better, right? And this is what the reality of it all is, right? Because we already know once we say yes to Jesus, we've already kind of reserved our space in heaven, right? We reserved our spot. We're good to go. Heaven is promised to us for those who believe and trust and say yes to the Lord, right? But while we're here on earth, His desire is for us to live our best life. And living our best life means understanding that we're going to go through trials and tribulations, that we're going to be highs and lows throughout it. But how best do we understand His word and use that to live our best life here? And that's what we've been talking about. And so the last question that God has for us is, why are you fighting against me? Why are you fighting against? Pastor, I don't fight against God. Oh, but you do. But you do. And we're going to talk about that this morning. But let me start off with I don't know if you appreciate my questions in the morning, because my first question of the day, because it kind of positions your heart and your mind to where I'm going. And so the question for today is, you ever get in a fight with someone over a trivial piece of like pop culture? Right? And you were absolutely convinced that that things that you believed or that you saw, that you understood was one way, but actually turned out to be another way. But you swore that you had it right. Like you were like, I'm right. I know this is right. And so being a father of 4 girls at all different stages of life, you can't really comprehend everything, because everybody's in contradiction of one another. They all believe something based on their time of life and what they see. And then mom and dad get in the picture, and then it's pandemonium. It's like WrestleMania in the house. Everybody's bouncing off the walls and saying, no, this is what I say. No, this is what I think. No. Guys, we were talking about Monopoly. Like, come on, right? Maybe you understood that the Monopoly guy was definitely the dude that wore the monocle. You know the monocle? But actually it was the Mr. Peanut guy, right? Or maybe that Fruit Loops, it's spelled F-R-U-I-T, right? That's the way it's spelled. Or it's F-R-O-O-T. Or that Kit Kat is actually hyphenated. No, it's not, right? These are the things that maybe like you argue about and go back and forth about and you strongly believe. You see, we've all had moments where we were certain that we were right, only to discover later that we were just dead wrong. We weren't lying, though. We were just mistaken. We were sure that we had the truth. We were absolutely sure that we had the truth, but as it turns out, we didn't. We didn't. And it's funny how much we don't want to admit that we've been wrong. It's crazy. We don't like admitting that we've been wrong, even when the thing that we are wrong about isn't really that big of a deal. Like, if I was to say who's the better baseball team, it's the Yankees, right? And then Dodger fans would say, no, it's the Dodgers. And I would have to correct you and say, you don't have a better record than we. Just saying. right? But sometimes the thing is a big deal. The thing that we find ourselves bickering about is a big deal. Sometimes we don't want to admit that we're wrong. But whatever it is, it's so core. It's so core to how you see the world that questioning it means questioning your identity. Questioning your identity, questioning your reputation, and the way that you spent so much of your time and your energy and your resources. We're like, listen, I'm in too deep. I'm in too deep. I've already come down on this so strong. I've talked about it. I've posted about it. I've convinced others to come to my side about it, that this stance has kind of become a defining characteristic of me. I'm in it so deep, right? It's part of how people perceive me. It's how people think of me, right? Mr. Aguilar is still trying to get me to wear something other than Nike. No, it's who I am. I grew up with it, right? It's part of my DNA. The sponsorship is bound to come at some point. So no, I'm not wrong. I can't be wrong. I've put too much into this. There's a name for this. And it's called sunk cost fallacy. This is when you have the reluctance to abandon something that you're heavily invested in, even after it's clear doing so would be beneficial. But in the end, it's not that we're afraid to discover that our idea is false, but more like that our identity is false. So we cling on to our current belief as hard as we can, even in light of contrary information. The issue here is that when we're so convinced that we have to defend our beliefs at all costs, sometimes the cost is in our own value system. I'll say that again. The problem that this rises is when we are convinced we have to defend our beliefs at all costs. Sometimes the cost is in our own value system. You see, we're willing to do what's wrong to prove that we're right. And maybe you've been there before. You've compromised your value system to prove that you were right. We turn into someone that we never wanted to be. You get into an argument with someone and they're looking at you like, what just happened? Where did this come from? Because you are so dead strong on what you believe and getting your point across and making it seem like you're right, that you're willing to do things that normally are out of character for you. Not to mention the fact that we have trouble being around others because our rightness is more important to us than any relationship. Think about that. You being right is more important to you than being in a relationship with someone who loves you. We turn into someone we've never wanted to be and others barely recognize. Not to mention the fact that we have trouble being around others because our rightness is more important to us than any relationship. I wanted you to hear and understand that part. And this is an easy fall that trap that we fall into. In fact, some of the most spiritual people in Scripture screwed up their lives in this very same way. One of the first things that we read in the book of Acts about the Apostle Paul, right, when he first got started, right, when his name was Saul before it became Paul, right, is this in Acts chapter 9, verse 1. And we're going to be combing through this real quickly. In verse 1, it says that Saul, which we all know as Paul, was spitting out threats with every breath. So he was out there chewing people out. He was out there condemning people, right? In other words, he was so convinced that people who thought that Jesus was God were heretics, that they didn't just need to be opposed, in fact, they needed to be killed. Because he didn't believe that Jesus was God. He grew up in the church. He understood, right, the Jewish systems, right, the Jewish beliefs. And he's out there spitting out venom to people. He's wanting people to say, hey, you're a heretic for believing that Jesus is God. You're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. And because you're wrong, you're going to die. This became his mission. But it was much more than that. It was really an obsession. Obsession. It consumed his every breath. He genuinely thought that he was actually doing the right thing. Living out God's will and being his best self. He actually thought that he was doing what he was supposed to do. Bless you. And then a bright light comes upon him and knocks him off his high horse. And a booming voice tells him to rethink his life. And in Acts 9:4, it says, he fell to the ground and heard a voice saying to him, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? And that term right there, persecuting, nobody really uses that word today. That's a term you rarely hear unless you're reading the Bible. But other translations say it this way. Saul, why are you oppressing me? Saul, why are you harassing and causing trouble for me? Saul, why are you being so cruel to me? Saul, why are you out to get me? Saul, why are you working against me? And Paul is genuinely confused about what's happening at this moment in his life. He's on his back. He's on the floor. This light has blinded him. He's hearing this voice come out of nowhere. And so he's confused. And so what does he say in verse 5? He says, who are you? Who are you? And so let's kind of jump back at that moment and put yourself in his shoes and think of the thud of that realization of that voice asking him, Saul, Saul, why are you doing this to me? And your thought process is like, wait, what? Like I'm doing this for you, God. I think that's you. I'm doing this for you, God. I'm helping you out. I'm on your team. And God is like, no, you're not. You're working against me. What you're actually doing is working against me. Now, I want you to keep in mind that Saul grew up in Judaism. Right? He knew all of the stories. He knew the law. He knew the prophecies. And there was no one more educated and religious than Saul. And he lived out his beliefs to an extreme. The issue was that he didn't realize that some of his beliefs were wrong. And not just wrong, they were literally anti-Christ, against Christ. But this story isn't just about Paul, friends. It's about us as followers of Christ as well. You see, if it can happen to him, then it can happen to us, any one of us. Is it possible that you're here today and that you think you're helping God in a certain area of life, but are really working against him? That the way that you're aggressively insisting that you are right, God sees you more like you're persecuting, oppressing, harassing, fighting, working against, and being cruel to him and his cause. That's something for us to think about. And you're probably here right now telling yourself, man, nope, not me. It can't be. If it was, I'd know it. But let me remind you of Paul, because Paul didn't know it. Paul didn't know that that's what he was doing. And he was arguably more educated, more intelligent, more devoted, more spiritual than you and I, and probably anyone in this room put together. Okay, Pastor, but definitely couldn't persecute anyone. No, not me. But are you sure about that? Are you sure about that? You see, according to a nationwide survey of college students, 51% believe that it's okay to shout insults at a speaker you disagree with. 19% believe that using violence to shut up a speaker is also acceptable. And they aren't just stats. We've seen these things happen in recent times, as in weeks and days. You see, when we lean into fear, and anger, we stop listening and learning. Why is that? When we lean into fear and anger, it automatically stops. It gives us the right of way, if you would, to stop listening and stop learning. So why is that? I believe it's because you're scared. You're scared. There's a brain scan research that shows us that having your deeply held beliefs challenged sets the same fear sensors as being chased by an angry bear. So when someone questions your belief system, when someone questions what you believe and what you think and what you hold to be true, it triggers something in your mind that says, dude, you're getting attacked, right? You're getting attacked and you're being chased by this angry bear. In other words, the more desperate you are to prove that you're right, the more likely you are to persecute those who think that you're wrong. Right now, many of you are like, when was the last time I did this? So let's dive a little bit deeper. Let's define what persecute is, right? To persecute is to be hostile. To be hostile, oppressive, or abusive towards someone else thinking of a differing opinion or belief. My mind is trying to run through the scenarios of when did I persecute someone last? It's not just rounding up people and putting them to death, because that's what we think of persecution. It's also rolling your eyes at anyone who disagrees with you. It's writing off anyone who challenges your perspective. It's verbally attacking someone online who sees the world differently than you do. Verse 8 and 9 in the book of Acts says, Saul is blinded and doesn't eat or drink for 3 days. So he's had this encounter. He's heard this voice. He's starting to process what has transpired in his life. And for 3 days, he has not eaten or drank. God struck him blind, and I think in some ways his sudden blindness is a metaphor. I'm not saying that's what the Bible says, but that's my interpretation. He hasn't seen a lot of things clearly for quite a while now. He begins to question everything, and he realizes that he's not who he wants to be. He's overvalued a lot of the wrong things. How many of us have done that before? We've overvalued the wrong things. And he's been unintentionally working against everything that he actually wants in life. Maybe you're in the same situation today. Sometimes this is why God allows our lives to collide with unexpected events. A sudden disruption can trigger a lot of introspection, if you ask me. When something collides in your world and disrupts it in some form or fashion, it gives you kind of a, oh God, I got to step back and I got to see what has transpired. Why are these things happening? Everyone hates hearing this, but sometimes getting what you don't want is actually a gift. It's actually a gift. Some episodes are God's way of showing us that something's off about the way that you're living, that we can't keep doing what we're doing, right, the way that we're doing it. It's our soul's way of inviting us to make a change. Something has to change, right? Because we think that we're fighting for God, but we've actually been fighting against him all of this time. Church, here's the reality. Some of us, not all of us, but some of us are just as blind as Paul. And ironically, we're fighting to stay that way. We're fighting to stay that way. In fact, when confronted with evidence that we might not be right, what do? We double down. We put our feet into the dirt and say, I don't want to see that study. I don't want to hear that preaching. I don't want to read that verse. I don't want to hear that story. And often we decide what we think early on, and then we stop listening to anything or anyone that might contradict it. We heard this, we believe it, and that's it to be it. No one, anything else anyone can say or do is going to deter me from that. And not only won't we listen to differing opinions, but we also cut ties with anyone who has who has an opinion, because they're either stupid or evil. They don't know what they're talking about. Friends, a lot of us say we want the truth, but you can't handle the truth. No, that's a different thing. But a lot of us say we want the truth, but what we really want is for someone out there to affirm what we've already decided is true. Bless you. And anyone who disagrees with us better tiptoe around us, or they'll be persecuted by us. Obviously, we wouldn't consider it persecution. We're just standing for the truth. So what keeps us from realizing that we're wrong? right? What keeps us from understanding that we're wrong? There are a couple of unconscious biases working against you, and I'm going to give you three. First one is confirmation bias, which means seeing what you expect to see. Second one is desirability bias, seeing what you want to see. So what you expect to see, what you want to see. And the third one is I'm not biased, right? And that's incorrectly believing that you see things clearly. In other words, it's likely, church, it's likely that you are most wrong about something that you are convinced you can never be wrong about. I wonder what you're wrong about that may be preventing you from becoming more like Christ. Oh, Pastor, I'm just set in my ways, but those ways are wrong. Oh, but Pastor, I just like things like this, but that could be wrong. And I wonder what it would take to get you to admit that you're wrong. Would it be a temporary blindness, like what happened to Saul? Would it be losing your job, your house, an opportunity, a relationship? I wonder what God has already tried to use to get your attention. Whatever it is, it wasn't big enough to shake you to the core and get you to question your own flawed thinking. There's a place later in the book of Acts where Paul is telling the story to someone else, right? And in verse 12 and 14, it mentions that it's hard it's hard for you to kick against the goads. Right? And so actually I had to look it up because I didn't know what a goad was, but this is a weird term. It's a weird term, but it's a common expression at that time. A goad was basically a sharp object that with a pointy end that the farmers would use to poke at a stubborn cow, a stubborn animal, right? A sheep or an ox to move in the right direction. Occasionally, the animal would kick the goad, right? He would kick whatever was poking him. But the harder it fought against it, the more likely it was to turn that small little poke into a deep stab wound. In other words, Jesus is asking, why are you willingly hurting yourself and others? Why are you willingly hurting yourself and others? My way wins in the end anyway. Right, you ever heard that term? If you turn to the back of the book, we win. We win. My way, his way, God's way always ends with us winning with him. But you're being eaten up by your own pride, by your own bitterness, by your own anger, by your own ego. Some of us are more stubborn than others, but nobody really likes hearing that that what they're believing is wrong or that they're behaving wrong. But not wanting to hear it doesn't mean that you don't need to hear it. Not wanting to hear it doesn't mean that you don't need to hear it. And this isn't just to say that you shouldn't have convictions. You should. We should all have convictions. But we only become secure in our convictions by allowing them to be challenged. So refusing to listen to those who think differently than you doesn't make you more intelligent than them. It doesn't. It makes you more insecure than them. Here's why. Because secure people don't get triggered by any opinion different from their own. They don't deal with disagreements by spewing venom online. They don't assume someone else is stupid or evil because they're taking a stance that's different than their own. Proverbs backs this up in chapter 18, verse 15. It says, intelligent people are always ready to learn. We're always ready to learn. In other words, the smartest people you know aren't arrogant know-it-alls. They're the ones with the humility to seek additional input. And in contrast, Proverbs 18:2 says, fools have no interest in understanding. In other words, growth means learning something new, not confirming what you think you already know. So are we growing as believers? Now, this doesn't mean that you don't have no conviction. As I said before, blindly believe any information we're presented. In fact, Paul says in Thessalonians 5:21, test everything that is said. Hold on to what is good. Test everything that is said and hold on to what is good. But here's the thing. You can't test something without first listening to it and considering it. This is really a challenge for us to test our own assumptions, to see where we're blinded. What areas in our lives are we blinded to, right? Which brings up another question. In fact, it's the question is, what do we test things against? Noah has been working on this end of year project, and it's a audible where she stands in front of the teachers and gives roughly an 8 to 10 minute speech. And for her is, what is truth? And she has to defend it because after her speech, she'll be bombarded with questions about what she has just said. And I bring that up because what is truth to you? Where do you get the truth? Where do you test things against? Where do we look to discover what is true and how to express and embody that truth? Well, Christians should believe that truth is Jesus. In fact, that the earth-shattering, mind-expanding, big idea behind Christianity is that truth exists in a person and not a set of principles. Jesus said in John 14:6, I am the way, the truth, and the life. I am the way, the truth, and the life. And what he's basically saying is, I and I alone embody the best way to live. I and I alone have the truth about reality. I and I alone am the meaning of life itself. So if you want to know what is true, then look to Jesus. He is the way, the truth, and the life. If you want to know what to do with truth, look to Jesus. But sometimes we rather have truth in a principle. If you could reduce truth to a simple black and white principle, you wouldn't have to wrestle with the ways, right? With the ways it's deeply personal, the ways it requires you to confront yourself instead of everyone else. Because to Jesus, surfacing truth isn't about getting the right information, but experiencing personal transformation. So I want to close with this. Jesus once said in John chapter 8, verses 31 to 32, it says, the truth will set you free. The truth will set you free. Now, he was not talking about intellectually knowing random fun facts or random truths about the world. What he was talking about was internally knowing the truth about yourself. About yourself. Ever learned something about yourself that was hard to hear? Like someone told you something and it was like, dang, that was rough. Not so much rough that they said it or in the way that they said it, but that the truth hurt you, exposed you, it revealed something about you. Maybe it was something about your temperament. Maybe it was something about your past or your personality. Maybe it was about how you saw people or how a habit was crippling you. But you had this aha moment and you realized, man, I've been wrong. I've been wrong all this time, and now that I know what I know, now that it's been exposed to me, I just can't continue doing the same thing I've been doing over. Friends, there's this version of this Jesus line that floats around recovering circles. And it says that the truth will set your feet free, but first it will piss you off. Now let that sink in a little bit. Why would it set you off like that? If the truth will set me free, why would it first set me off like that? Well, because learning that you're wrong often requires you to take action to make things right. And that's the challenging part. That's the part that will get you angry, because it requires you to change. To change. So here's my challenge for you today. I want you to start each day this week by asking God. Ask God, number one, is there anyone that I'm not treating right? Is there anyone that I'm just like, I'm wrong. I'm treating them so wrong. I've disrespected them. I have not loved them the way they need to be loved. And number two, is there any area where I'm wrong? Is there any area where I am wrong? I've been doing this for so long. I've been thinking like this for so long. Show me, Lord. Expose to me. Share with me. Tell me the areas where I have been wrong. And then I want you to act on what He reveals to you. Do something about it. Here's the thing. I know that for some, this may be awkward and difficult to do because it makes you feel weak or feel or look weak, stupid, or unprincipled. But psychologists tell us that admitting when we're wrong doesn't make us look less competent than others. In fact, it makes us look honest, self-aware, and willing to learn. 3 traits that build trust in others and allows you to make things right. I don't know about you, but I want to make things right. I want to make things right with the people that I love and care about. And if it means letting God gut me out and expose my wrongs, and if it means changing my life, uprooting me and changing things, let it be. Because I want His will over my will. His way over my way. Because His way, His love is better than mine. Amen. Just stand with me.
South Hills Church, I just want to take a moment and say thank you for watching our service online. Whether you're watching it for the first time or you're watching it again because you enjoyed the service so much from the weekend, I'd like to take a moment and dive into our giving. Every week we give people the opportunity to give back and give to the local church so that God can continue to bless your lives and bless your finances. Here at South Hills, we believe that everything comes from God. We believe that He's the one that chose us and brought us into this world, gave us our gifts and talents and abilities. And I just want you to know that when we give, we are giving back what God has already given to us. If you've ever seen any of our envelopes at a South Hills campus, you'll see on there that it says, every week at South Hills, your generosity is giving people the opportunity to live a better story. And there's a scripture on there in Matthew chapter 6, verse 21 that says, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. So I want to encourage you today to click down below and set up your giving, whether it's for the first time or whether you're doing reoccurring giving. We have 4 ways to give here at South Hills. 1, you can do it in person at any of our campuses through an envelope. Or 2, you can actually text any amount that you would like to 84321. And the 3rd way is to download our Church Center app. I encourage you to do this one because the Church Center app gives you opportunity to stay connected with our church and your campuses. It's a great tool and resource for you to know what's going on. And the 4th way to give is to give online. You can go to southhills.org/give and you can set up your giving there. Whether you're a guest of our church or whether you are a member of our church, or whether you simply just like to watch our services, I encourage you to trust God with your finances so that He can bless and anoint your finances and you can be trusting God in this journey of living life to the fullest. I love you and thank you for watching our online service today.